Hello, this is Bob Gray Sr. Welcome to Ministry Moments. And for some reason, we've had some technical difficulties. And I have a dear brother who works for us on this Ministry Moments and does a great job. But for some reason, I don't know what happened. I did it, but it didn't go up. So you're getting version 2 today. So I want to talk to you and follow up on this particular Ministry Moments on what we did last week on the matter of the Joseph principle. I'm stammering here. I'll be all right. The Joseph interpreted a dream by Pharaoh. He had 7 years of feast and 7 years of famine. He talked about some fat kine, and then he talked about full stalks of corn. And but the feast came before the famine, and so nobody could interpret the dream, but Joseph did. And he told Pharaoh that there were going to be 7 years of feast, and it was going to be followed with 7 years of famine. I call this the Joseph principle because it's just a fact of life. It's going to be that way, feast and famine. Now, the wisdom that you have that God gave to Joseph to help Pharaoh and help Egypt out is the same type of teaching and philosophy that'll help us throughout our lifetime, because there's going to be feast, famine, feast, famine, feast, famine. That's just the way that it's going to be. So last week I talked about the Joseph principle. And so today I want to talk to you about percentages. And I want to help you because this is going to happen again. And when it comes and it happens again, you'll be prepared for it in your life. But it's going to happen again. There are bear markets and there are bull markets. And the markets go up and the markets go down. I always had a rule of 5 years. If I invested in a stock, I didn't look at it. Don't look at it every day. It'll drive you crazy. But over the long term, you're going to have feast and famine, feast and famine. Now, let me give you a little underlying principle here that will help you in the future. It may be that there's nothing now, the virus is hit, everything's shut down, your jobs are shut down, everything is shut down, and now you find yourself in a famine. But before that, boy, things were flying high. The first 3 years of President Trump's presidency, he cut the red tape. He did what every executive ought to do, and to get the policies out of the way so that America could be productive. And America became productive because of his getting rid of the policies. The Democrats live for power. They don't live for the people. And you say, are you a Republican? No, I'm an independent. I'm an independent Baptist. I'm an independent politician. So I don't know how in the world you could be a Democrat. Abortion? I mean, come on. And then the governor in Virginia said he thinks you ought to have the right even after the baby's born to whether you want the baby to live or not live. Anyway, get off of that. The 7 years of feast and 7 years of famine is something that's going to be a regular occurrence in your lifetime and in your children's lifetime and in your grandchildren's lifetime. But let me give you a little underlying principle that'll help you get through this. This is the title of the Ministry Moments, percentages. Percentages. Now, a tithe is 10%. If you make $100 a week, then $10 belongs to God. It's holy unto the Lord. If you make $1,000 a week, then it's $100 a tithe, but both are equal in God's sight because the tithe is 10%. So when you tithe, you give 10%. Now, Malachi said, you've robbed me in tithes and offerings. Now, it just makes sense to me that if the tithe is 10%, then your offerings ought to be on a percentage basis. And I'll tell you why. Because your hours will be cut, your company will go broke, you will lose your job, and all of that which you base on overtime is going to just quickly slip out the door. Now, so the best way to look at your handling of your finances is look at it in the terms of percentage. So basically, the tithe is 10%. Instead of you coming back in and saying, oh my, I've got to cut back, Pastor, on my missions giving because my hours are cut and I can't keep up that $20 commitment I made every week. Well, the mistake was making the $20 commitment. Not that it was wrong to make a commitment, but you should have done it on a percentage basis. That way, it never goes down. That way, if you have more hours, then they'll receive more money for missions or bus ministry or debt retirement or whatever it might be. But base it on a percentage. That way, it's never a matter of saying, Pastor, I'm going to have to cut back. Because, Pastor, I don't want you to think I'm backslid. I'm not right with God, but I can't give what I said I was going to give. Now, let me give you some thoughts. Tithe, 10%. Notice in the scriptures now how that God refers to like a fifth. For example, in Leviticus, he said, if you're late on a tithe, then add a fifth, which is 20%. That's what you're supposed to do. Now, but God talks in terms of a fifth or a quarter or a third. All of those are percentages. Take note of it as you read the Word of God, and you'll see God referring to percentages. So all of those are percentages. Now, I think your budget ought to be based on percentage. The church budget, your family budget, debt retirement, no more than 25%. Anybody that knows anything about finances will tell you that. 25%, don't go above that. 25% of your income. Utilities, 10 to 15% of your income. The lower you can get, we had notices on the doors in the classroom, shut the lights off, save God's money. Because the more we can save, let's say we go from 15 down to 10, well, that 5% can be used for the bus ministry, can be used for missions, can be used for Sunday school, and a lot of other things, but it can't be used if you spend it on electricity. Get your computerized air conditioning and heating and put those in the auditorium and in the classroom so they automatically turn on, automatically shut off, because people forget and people walk out and they may forget to turn the air conditioning back to normal or the heat back to normal. Administration, staff, I would say 40%. 45% maximum. I don't like 45%. I want to get it down to 40%. All right. Now, this is you taking control of the finances and not the finances taking control of you. All right. Percentages. That's the thought today. Percentages. Now, here we go. Number one, set your budgets based on percentage. Whether it's the church budget, whether it's your family budget, whatever it might be, set your budgets based on percentages. Don't base it on overtime. Don't base it, well, I work 60 hours a week, 40 hours, and 20. Boy, that's time and a half. Don't live on that. Don't live on it, because there's going to come time when it's going to come back. Don't forget, feast, famine, feast, famine. So set your budgets based on percentages. Number two, second thought is this. That way you never have to cut back when you're giving. That way you never have to cut back. 10% is 10%. A tithe is a tithe. It's not a matter, God's not a respecter of persons. And somebody may make more money than you, and they may give more because the percentage, they have more to work with, but God looks down and God's going to bless you equally because it is still a percent. Now, your expenses to income. Do not spend more than 25% on mortgage of your income. Do not spend more than 15% on utilities. Cut the lights off. Put some computerized air conditioning and heat on the wall so that it will automatically shut down and open up. Save you money. 10 to 15%. 40% staff. So 45%, I know some do 45, it scares me. I would go back to 40. We never lived on 100% of our income at the two churches I pastored. No, it was 80% because we wanted that cushion, because we knew things were going to happen. Boy, we're seeing it now, aren't we? 3 years of prosperity, and boy, things really clicking and things are really moving. More people employed in the history of record keeping. And so much good was done. But boy, it was overturned. And I believe China flubbed the dub. I think China messed up. And I think the world's paying for it. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Feast and famine. All right. Next, when you do your percentage, let's say, okay, I'm going to give 5% of my income to missions. That's what I'm going to do. Base it on 40 hours a week. Don't base it on overtime, because that overtime can be cut back. In fact, you could get laid off like now. Some people unemployed, 20% unemployment now. We've not seen this since the Great Depression, and we're living in it now. But there's going to be 7 years of feast and 7 years of famine. The same policies that built it the first 3 years will be the same policies that will build it the next 3 years. The executive powers that the president has, oh my goodness. What a great opportunity. And we voted the right man in, I believe. All right. Now, your hours, translate your 40 hours, 5% into a money amount. we would have them fill out cards, called decision cards, but a promise for what you're going to give for tithing for this year, what you're going to give for whatever. Now those, I wanted that number in there. I wanted that monetary number in there, but I wanted them to take their 40 hours, take 10% and translate it back into an actual money figure. And then take, let's say you go to 2% for missions. All right. Then the 40 hours, based on 40 hours, don't base it on the 60. Now, when you work 60, guess what? That means we got more money for missions. That means we got more money for operating expenses at the church. Wow. More money for debt retirement, more money for the bus ministry. That's a blessing. But don't base your commitment on that. You base your commitment on the 40 hours a week that you work. Next, your hours or pay may be cut back, but the percentage will never be cut back. Your hours and pay may be cut back, but your percentage will not be. Convert the percentage, as I've said, into a monetary amount. We pass out a card in January, Stewardship Month, and people fill it in. This is my tithe. This is my prep missions. This is my bus. This is my debt retirement, and so on. But I wanted them to do it based on their 40 hours, not on the overtime, because that overtime can go away just like that. So then I want them to turn that into a monetary figure and put it on the card. Same thing with missions. If you say, well, I'm going to, and give yourself room to grow. There's a thin line between faith and foolishness, a very thin line. And you want to make sure that you're being realistic when you do this to give for example, 75% of the commitments for missions. That's what I operated our missions on, not 100%. Now, let's say we hit 100% or 90% or 80%. Wonderful. Then let's use that for Christmas gifts for the missionaries. Let's use it for the missions month meetings coming the next year and have a good meeting, a monetary basis for the next missions meeting. Next, pay yourself after you give tithes and offerings. Pay yourself after you give your tithes and offerings. For example, you ought to use your 401k at work where you are. You ought to use it and take advantage of it. At the church, we up to 10 years. If you worked at the church for 10 years, up to $100, we would match that. And we had, through the Wells Fargo, we had a plan set up for those that worked at least 10 years on the staff. So you want to pay yourself. You want to make sure you give your tithes off. Don't rob God. Don't rob God, but do it on a percentage basis. Do it on a percentage and translate that into a monetary number based on 40 hours, not 60, not 80. Okay, you got that? All right. Then pay yourself. After you've done that, then pay yourself. Set aside, be a part of the 401k at the church. If you're at the church, but where you work. All right. Prepay on mortgage. We started out by saying, every church member give $1. Give $1 per member. And that's how we started out prepaying on our mortgage at the church. You know, it grew to $2,000 a week, but it started out $1 per member. Then each year they would increase the amount that they gave. And then I wanted them to do it based on percentage so that they could give me a real figure to work with when working up and amortizing the mortgage. Do this with your home. If you're paying $1,000 a month or $800 a month, good grief, put aside $20 and prepay on that mortgage. That brings the balance down. And when they apply the interest rate to that balance, it's already lower. Guess what? You're actually lowering your percentage that you're paying the bank. Oh, you'd be shocked. Amortize your house mortgage. Amortize your church mortgage. You will be shocked at how much interest money that bank is making off of your 15-year loan or 20-year loan or whatever. Now, what you need to do is you need to prepay on that mortgage every week and have an open-end mortgage agreement with the bank so that they expect it to happen. And you can cut a 15-year note down to 7 years and cut the interest in half. Next, this will help you. This will help you. Pay off list all your debts. Okay. Let's say that you have a Visa card. You've got $500 on that Visa card and you're paying $25 a month. You got that? All right. Then list that, number one. That's the smallest debt that you have. And the $25 a month payment. Now, you may have let's say you have a note on a car repair. And let's say that you've got a payment of $100 a week on that. That's a lot of money, but you had to do it. And now what you want to do is pay off on the on the Visa card. Let's say that's $50. Let's say it's $50. Pay that thing off. But don't take the $50 and squander it. Take the $50, add it to the next on your list of $100, then pay $150 on that bill. Then you can take the third largest, your smaller, large and larger, and so on. Let's say that's $125 a month. Now, you've got 50 plus 100 plus the third. Now, what you're doing, you're having a snowball effect, and you will, if you'll do it right, you'll find yourself out of debt before you know it. And so on purpose, say to yourself, look, I've got this Visa card. I've got to pay $50 a month this Visa card. Once I get that $500, I'm just making this up here, $500 off, I'm going to take that 50 and add it to the 75 or the 100, whatever the next one is. Wow, guess what? Now you're speeding up paying off of those bills. Then take 1 and 2, add together, and then add it to the third on that list. Now you want to list all your bills, start with the smallest first, then the next largest, next largest, next largest, and then the monthly payment over here, list the monthly payment, and then add that once one is paid off. Don't just put that in your pocket or spend it for Snickers candy bars. Take it and add it to the next one. Once that's paid off, then take those 2 and add to the third. Once that's paid off, take those 3, add it to the fourth. You see what I'm doing? And then that snowball effect. Now, ministry moments. What we're talking about today is percentages. The tithe, that's 10%. He said, you robbed me of tithes and offerings. Well, I thought to myself, well, if a tithe is 10%, then my offerings ought to be on a percentage basis. Then I discovered that God said, when you're late on your tithe, add a fifth. That's 20%. So it was percentage. Then I got to read in the Bible where God said a fifth, and then God said a quarter, and then God said a third. I thought, oh my goodness, God deals in percentages throughout the scripture. So I might as well take that and use it for an advantage on this matter. Again, I'm adding to the Joseph principle, 7 years of feast, 7 years of famine. So do your debt retirement on your budget, whether it be church or whether it be home, 25%, no more than that. The percentage of your expense to your income, no more than 25% for debt retirement. Utilities, 15% maximum. I prefer 10. I like 10. Ours was about 8 or 9%. I watched it carefully. And by the way, the leadership, when they see those financial reports and you train them right about the percentage limits, that'll help them to understand, because they may pay $100 for electric bill and the church may be spending $2,500 and they scratch their head. They don't understand. Why is it so expensive? Well, they don't understand the magnitude of what you're dealing with here, but they understand a percentage. So 25% debt retirement, 10 to 15% utilities, 40 to 45% of staff or administration. Now, if you go above that, whoa, time to put the brake on. We've got to figure out what's wrong. We've got to do some changing here so we make sure we stay inside those percentages. And so ministry moments, we're talking about percentages now. So set your budgets based on percentage. Number 2, that way you will never cut back on your giving, because percentage is a percentage. All right. Then set it for growth. Set your percentage for growth. 2% missions, let's say. 2% debt retirement. I'm talking about your giving. And 2%. And then base that on a 40-hour work week and take that 2%, translate it into a monetary amount so that the pastor's got something to work with when he's trying to put his budgets together. Next, your hours or pay may be cut back, but a percentage is never cut back. 10% is 10%. It's just there, and it's not going to change. All right. So you may cut back on your hours, but you never cut back on percentage, and you're not looking like you backslid on God, All right. Now convert the percentage into a monetary amount to help the pastor, because he's trying to figure out his missions, trying to figure out debt retirement and so on. So base it on 40 hours, take that percentage, turn it into a monetary amount, and put it on that card that we hand out January every year, this card, and they put on their tithes and offerings of faith promise, and they put on a bus and debt retirement and so on. So convert your 40 hours into a percentage and that into a monetary amount. Pay yourself after you give tithes. Take a percentage and pay yourself after you pay your tithes and offerings. Next, use the 401k program at church. you got it at church. You're wise if you do, but at the place where you work. They'll match you. If you $50 in, we'll put $50 in. Take advantage of it, because I'm telling you, you need to prepare 7 years of feast, 7 years of famine. Prepay on your mortgage. That way it's deducted off of the balance. That way it cuts back to 15-year. You can cut it back as far as to 7 years. Then you cut the interest in half. It just makes sense. We started at the church, as I mentioned, $1 per member. Then it grew to $2,000 a week off of the debt retirement. Then pay off small debts. List your debts, small, a little bit larger, a little bit larger, a little bit larger to your largest, and so on. And then the monthly payment. Now, when you pay that, and you get that small one, let's say a Visa card, $500, and you get it paid off, we'll take that 50 and add it to the 75 or 100 on the next monthly payment. You got that? Yeah, it'll work. And then once you complete that second one, then add the first two to the third. Then add the 3 to the fourth. The snowball effect, oh my goodness, I cannot begin to tell you what a difference it will make. Ministry moments, I'm trying to add on to the Joseph principle that we talked about last week. If you did not see it, you've got to go back and to solve church problems, YouTube, and go to Ministry Moments, subscribe, and then you go on there and you listen to it, and I promise you it'll be a help to you. Well, Ministry Moments today, we had technical problems. I'm not the guy. I have a dear brother who's my IT guy, and he takes care of everything. And he called me and said, we had a snafu. You're going to have to do it again. I don't mind doing it again. I hope it was a blessing to you. I just hate not doing it when I said I was going to do it. It bothers me. But anyway, so here, Ministry Moments. The topic is percentages. Add this to last week's principle, Joseph principle, and I think you'll find something to be a blessing to you. Again, I am sorry for the snafu. Is that a word? Snafu. I'm sorry for the mix-up, but we got it fixed. And so God bless you. Please listen every week, Friday, hopefully at 3 o'clock Central Time for Ministry Moments. God bless you. Thank you for joining me.